G'day folks, welcome back to the channel. So been doing a bit of work on the Sprinter this afternoon, and I thought some of you might be interested to see what I've got underneath this car as opposed to the outside, which looks a bit ruddy now. I actually gave it a bit of a wipe over this afternoon, a little bit of a slight clean, not much, just a bit of a wipe over, just because it was just dusty as heck and didn't look very good at all. So I thought I might show you some of the things I've done to this car. Rightio, so it's just laying on my side at the moment. So under here, so this is fuel tray, I guess you could call it. It looks like a big drop tank, but it's just essentially a box, a tray that I've got the fuel cell sitting in. And these little fins or strakes, whatever you'd like to call them, I put these on because I put these on as well. I just try and do two things at once here. So I had these bolted under the floor as well. So these are little they bolted under the car on an angle like that. So a bit of an idea I got from seeing some cars with diffusers and whatnot on them. Now the reason behind that, so I've got four on the, it'll be a bit hard to see, so I've got four on the fuel tray itself, and then I had two either side, which are pretty much right behind the wheel. Now you might think it's just a gimmick, it doesn't work, but I've done a track day out at Morgan Park and it has a very fast turn 9, and this car was a bit sort of tail endy going through turn 9, and I had the idea to put these on to try and straighten the air up, and at that stage I had the exhaust pointing out the side as well, so it doesn't really look very well, but you can see a bit of beating that I've done on the lip of the sill there for the exhaust to exit out the side. So I redone the exhaust to come straight out the back here. So essentially you're trying to channel the air to be as straight as possible coming off the back of the car. Now I didn't do any suspension mods to it at all until I did that, just to see what it did, and then I had another track day out at Morgan Park to test that theory, and let me tell you, there was a big difference. The car was a lot more stable going through turn 9, and you could pretty much just hold it flat in the dry in this car anyway. So, you know, I've had people that I race with just kind of laugh at me and whatnot. I've tried a few different things on this car in the last 2 years of racing it. And, you know, everyone's got their own opinions and their ideas on what they think works. But I had an idea and come up with those things that I made up just out of alloy and whatnot, and turns out they worked. So lap times at every track that I went to, Morgan Park, QR, Lakeside especially, which is a fast flowing track, the time just dropped. Like I'm talking, you know, 1 second, 1.5, depending on what tyres I had on at the time. In some instances it was 2 seconds faster. So what I'm just showing you at the moment, I'm losing a bit of light late in the afternoon. So I've taken the original panhard bar off because they're only thin and they don't feel too strong. So we're going to be doing a little bit of drifting in this car, so you probably want a stronger panhard bar. So it's exactly what I put in it. So this bar I've actually had for years, and it's a adjustable one, got heim joints either end, as you can see there, and I've got it set up now so the diff's nice and centered to the wheel arches. And what we have here is a Hilux diff from around 2000 to 2002, I think this one was. And she does a trick. It's really too heavy for a race car, that diff, for a light little race car like this. And a bit of overkill, but you know what? You're not going to break axles with it, and you're not going to have any dramas with it. I did have a limited slip diff in this, limited slip center, but it kept opening up at the corners, especially apex and off the corner, even though I was told it shouldn't do it. We've done it up tight, but it still did it, and I just lost big time coming off the turn. So I got fed up with it, pulled it out, got a hold of a full spool and put that in it, and instant the car's, you know, half a second to a second quicker there alone. Now you might think I've got adjustable upper and lower control arms, but I actually don't. I know it's a bit hard to see. So you can see standard arms, top and bottom. And I know it's dark, it's getting late in the arvo. And not sure if you can see there. So we've got the Toyota Altezza gearbox cross member bolted to the J160 that comes in the Altezzas. Some custom made steel drive shaft, because I don't want any issues with alloys or anything like that. Now this here I got off a friend of mine who races one of the two Team Toyota Australia. And a little bit of time focusing in it. One of the two Team Toyota E86 coupes. So I got two of these coilover shocks here off him, which were spares he had for that. So there's a little bit of Group A history in this car. I've changed the spring. The spring, I think, is from memory a 4 kilo spring in the back of this. I'm probably going to change that to one of the 6 kilo springs that I've got. And we'll see how it goes first out at drifting. Yeah, so I cleaned the panhard bar up, painted it, and put it on this afternoon. Literally just a few minutes before making this. Gave it a wipe over, but yeah, so I'll show you. I've just got the car out the shed now and wheel off the front. I'll show you under the front. So what I actually have here is, see in there slightly, see anodized red radius rod. Is this actually going to work? Oh look, I should have done that underneath the car. Classic. So what I've got there is a T3 front end kit they make for these. As you can see, adjustable Heim joint there. Now you can still see she's pretty dirty under here. I need to give it a good clean. So these come with a fixed joint at the front and a Heim joint at the back. Some people call them rose joints. I'm a bit old school. We call them Heim joints. It comes from Speedway, I guess. Drag races probably call them that as well. But so there's a fixed joint at the front. Now, I don't want to say a bad thing about T3. They do a good job. This is by no means any sort of sponsored plug. I'm not sponsored by anyone or anything at the moment. But they come with a fixed joint at the front. And I kind of don't agree with that. You want it to be free, even though you think this only travels one direction. Well, it kind of doesn't. So the angle that your bottom control arm is moving, that's a whole A section. So you need some sort of flexibility in this joint here to compensate for the motion of travel that bottom control arm follows. So I'm not the best at explaining very many things, but yeah, bear with me. So anyone who kind of has any idea about suspension knows exactly what I'm talking about. I just struggle to put things into words. I'm just not that good that way. But hands-on, you know, technical things I am pretty good. It's just pretty much explaining. But anyway, so there's two things that I don't really agree with what they do. One, having a fixed joint at the front. The other is these hinge joints on the lower control arm are imperial. Those nuts there, those lock nuts, are imperial. Now my biggest gripe, even though your fittings for brakes and stuff like that are imperial, my biggest gripe with a metric car is having imperial things on it. It's just out of place. But anyway, moving on. So I've got the 8 kilo springs in the front of the BC Racing Gold. You might think they're kind of an entry level sort of system. I bought these back in 2015 or 16, I think. Now I've only been racing the car full on for the last 2 years, but they work great. 8 kilos actually is pretty good in this. I could probably go up another ½ kilo maybe, or just stiffen compression a bit more, but the car handles good. I have played around with ride height, suspension, everything to get it handling best I can, and at the moment it's proven. Of the 2 years of racing, I won two championships. So one first time out and then went back to back last year. So, you know, that speaks for itself. The other thing is these come with, well, originally I got cross-drilled rotors for this. But the problem is, you can see all the fractures in them. The problem is the cross-drilled rotors, because these rotors are so thin, and it'd be nice if they were thicker. So Wilwood, if you're out there listening, can you please make these rotors thicker? Because they're so thin, they heat up quick, but they cool down quick. So that fluctuation, as far as I know, is what causes all these fractures. The sudden, drastic changes in temperature from hot to cold, or from cold to hot and then hot to cold. But apart from that, they've been good. I just had to change 2 sets of rotors each year. So this is the 4th set of rotors I've had on this car. 4 set of rotors, 2nd set of pads actually. So these pads I got off MSB, which is a local brake parts supplier. Again, not a sponsored plug, but he's great. Helps everyone out in the motorsport industry. And yeah, I was after a slightly harder wearing pad that was not going to lose too much bite, and that's exactly what it gave me. So these are M119s. They work pretty good. The hubs, I did have the Techno toy tuning hubs on this, but I had a bearing failure and it destroyed the hub with it. So these are MRP from New Zealand. Again, not a sponsored plug, but they were a bit cheaper, so it was pretty much the price I got for 2 of these hubs is what I could get for 1 of the other hubs that T3 make. The only thing is, a lot of these center caps, these bearing caps, they come off. whether it, vibrations and stuff like that from racing, but unfortunately they come off. So yeah, that's why I've got the race tape on there to try and keep them on. So I'll show you the hub. I'll just grab it. So this is the hub from T3. Now these are beautifully machined hubs. 5 by 114.3, which is Ford. Everyone knows Ford, Nissan, Toyota, whichever other manufacturer uses that pattern. But they're also 4 as well. Now, I kind of pride myself on maintenance because I race bikes, like it's there actually wrapped up. So because you race bikes, you've got to be on top of maintenance because it's essentially your life that's at stake. Now, I thought to myself, I've done, what did I do? 8 months, I think it was, of racing. And I thought I'll replace it at the end of the year. Well, I did at the end of the year, the first year racing, and managed to avoid any catastrophe. Second year, I got to 8 months again on a new set of bearings. The rear I'd already changed 3 times, I think it was, because I had a leaky seal and whatnot, so that was sorted. But the second year of racing, unfortunately, the bearings that I got didn't hang in there quite as long as what the first set of bearings did. And I thought it was getting a little loose, but the only reason why I guess I kind of let it go was because it's in a car. And I know it's better to be safe than sorry. And, I'm sure even the best have been caught out as well. So no one's perfect. But the thing is, it happened around eighth or ninth month, I think it was. So it happened earlier than what I actually changed the ones the previous year. And I thought that would be right, but turns out they weren't. It decided to let go, and I could feel it in the front, and then I just knew something wasn't right in the front, so I managed to limp home. But I still won that racing class. But what it did is it absolutely chewed the inside of this out. Now I'd like to get that welded up and get an engineer to fix it. So I've got spare hubs for it. But it absolutely just seriously machined it and destroyed it. And like I said, I'm spewing about it and kicking myself over the situation. But it's the same sort of story, shoulda, coulda, woulda. But anyway, we all live and we learn. And it ain't going to happen again. So I have one of these in good condition, which is my spare hub now. Now that's one failure I've had racing this car. The second is a clutch. Completely blew it to smithereens. Now I'm thinking it's a light car. I don't flog it, or I'm not aggressive with anything. Actually, I've had 3 failures. This is the third. The other failure I had was last year. Was 5th gear selector fork, which is also reverse in the J160 gearbox. So that was me. I admit I was changing too quick. This is at Lakeside. You want to change gears quick. We all want to in a race car, but when you got standard components like the gearbox, it's going to be a matter of time before they eventually fail on you. So yeah, the selector fork, 5th gear selector fork in the J160 is originally the first failure. That was the second failure. The clutch is the third, and hopefully the last. So they say, things happen in threes, so hopefully that's it for failures. Now, you could say I'm an idiot for putting a standard clutch in it and not putting something, more durable. Well, I certainly do now, because the one I've got in it is essentially a brass button clutch, so it doesn't have the extra dampening springs. But it's another thing, we live and we learn. I thought I would be, easy on the car, and I've normally got a lot of mechanical sympathy because, I don't have deep pockets, and I like to look after my stuff because it'll just last that way. But anyway, so this is failure number 3. And yeah, again, live and learn. Put a decent clutch in it, haven't had a problem. So that happened last year out at Morgan Park, which was around midway, was it midway through the year? No, towards the end of the year, I think it was. It was later in the year. So that and that were within 2 rounds of each other, I think, from memory. So yeah, but anyway, move on to the rest of the car. So back on the car, you can see I put the banner on this afternoon, just threw the wheel on. So I'm running standard sway bar on the front. I'm actually not running a sway bar on the back at the moment. Let's try to turn this light on again. There we go. So you can see I wiped it over. Put the tow hook on the front. Dog next door is not too happy. It really doesn't look that good with that alloy on the front, or that scruffy standard front bumper bar, but it is what it is. I need to fix the race front bar, and there's a bit of work that needs to be done to that. Put the standard rear bar on the back, tail light back in it. I've actually put the bulkhead back on, spare seat in it. I've done something I wouldn't normally do. Now this is not all fixed and painted. I've actually, it's because I'm a little disgusted in it. What I've actually done is just spray it with a bit of acrylic, just for now, so it doesn't look as bad or ratty. As you can see, it kind of being black, everything kind of blends in, which is another reason why I love black. But yeah, just make it less obvious. I've still got a bit to do to that whole flare and rear quarter, but it just doesn't look as bad being one colour. That's what inside looks like. Still a little dusty in here. Yeah, these I've painted a couple of months ago. Been meaning to do that for months, and pretty much went whole 2 seasons of racing with them. White, the gel coat of the doors. So you can see some protection I've got there for my knees. I'll give you a better idea. Hydraulic handbrake. Yeah, just essentially bare essentials, what I need right at my fingertips. Moving on. Haven't done the radiator yet. That's next on my list of things to do, is to get an actual Beams 3S3 G86 radiator to put in it. Cross member, back to the firewall. I made the other alloy strut brace. I bought that. It's looking a bit ratty, but that friend of mine, Matt, made that up. Absolute brilliant welder. Anything is, to get anything made up, I've got to travel 2.5 hours to get to him. But well worth it. I'd love to get him to make more stuff, but don't need anything made just yet. So I do for the Supra, but that's in the works. So yes. So there she is, all tucked away again. So as you can see what I mean, I need dry days to work on the car because there is no room to work on it. All my steel and sheets of alloy in there and whatnot. It's a little bit about the Sprinter. As far as the front end goes, I'm running the standard sway bar, which could probably run a thicker one, but with the beams 3SG in it having a front sump, unless you modify the firewall slightly, then you run into issues with the sway bar. So how I set the engine up, I modified the firewall slightly, like I said, and it clears the sway bar by probably barely a finger, actually. One of the things I did do with this car, because I bought the T3 front and it just made it all adjustable, is I kind of stretched it out a bit. So I know this, seriously, this annoys me. Anyone who knows me knows I like to look after my stuff, but I'm telling you, this annoys me, this and the damage that it's copped the last 2 years. But again, it's racing, things happen, everyone's got different skill levels. So I'm doing what I can to fix this because I hate seeing it. And it's also another reason why I painted it black. Until I get the chance to finish it all properly, I've just disguised it with a bit of acrylic paint. So when I put the Hilux diff in it around 2017, so I was working on this car when I was recovering from broken back and pretty banged up wrists. I broke my ankle as well though. So yeah, long story short, I use this car as a bit of therapy as well, to sort of get my brain sort of back into things and just kind of take the focus off how bad the injuries were that I got back in 2016. So it knocked me around for 2 years, but in 2017, when I was more mobile, I really started to get stuck into this and rebuilding it. And this video kind of might drag on a bit, but if you want to know something particular about this car, I've had this car for about 22 years, roughly 21, 22 years. And it's probably, apart from some memorabilia that I've got, like some shirts, probably some model cars, this would have to be the thing I've owned the longest out of anything. So it's a very special car to me. But so to see it looking as ratty as it does now, like I've got some pictures that I posted up in the previous video to sort of give you a bit of an idea on how good it looked. I'll put a couple more up in this video. Actually, I'll put a couple up from Lakeside when I finished it and got it out for its first run on track again in early 2023. The thing looked freaking mint, brand new, nice shiny black. If only it stayed that way. But as we all know, that race cars, they just get shot blasted to crap and sometimes damaged. When I got the Hilux diff, I actually did get aftermarket rear control arms for this. Now they're from one of the parts of the world that everyone knows you get cheaper parts from. Won't mention names or anything. But I got these thinking beauty, that way I can adjust the pinion angle and the actual wheelbase. If you draw a line in the center of the car, the wheelbase back to the center axle, the center line of the center axle, you can lengthen it, shorten it, change the pinion angle, whatever you want. So I thought, beauty, I'll get adjustable upper and lower control arms. Now I actually was going to do an equal length top arm as well. But at that stage, I was kind of being a little bit annoying at times in my old man's workshop where this car was. And, you know, big thanks to him for putting up with it, because as anyone knows, when you're cutting and grinding and welding and restoring a car, that can get pretty loud. So, you know, I'm very appreciative for him for letting me do that back then. But it was also therapy for when I was healing from the bike crash, which was a motocross crash. But anyway, the control arms that I got for this, they were adjustable. But when I went to fit them, as anyone would do, you keep the standard size bolts for the control arms. When I went to fit them up, the bolt wouldn't go through the eyelet or the hole on the heim joints on the adjustable control arms that I just bought. And I just went, strange that. And you can't exactly put a smaller diameter bolt in it because it's going to move around. Even if you do it up tight, it's not tight to the hole, so it's going to move around. So the control arm in the mount, probably shouldn't, it's going to move. So I was just like, great. So what I actually tried to do is set it up in a vise in a way that I don't damage the heim joint or anything like that, and drill it out. But anyway, short story long, I tried to drill it the same size, like work up in increments in the drill bits to get to the size that the bolt was for the bottom control arms. But it just kept moving in the vise, like I couldn't hang on to it properly. And I was going to get an engineer to do it, but like I said, at that time I wasn't working, I was recovering from injury, and I didn't have money to spend on the car. Even though I did buy things here and there, I actually bought a lot of things before I got injured. So that was a big help, because it just meant I could focus on doing a lot of body work that needed to be done, and things that already got there, I could go onto them when I get stuck on other areas of the car. But anyway, I was pretty annoyed that these new upper and lower control arms I got for the back of this car that were adjustable, I couldn't put in. So as frustrating as that is, I just put them aside, and they're actually in a box in the corner of the shed on the other side of the car over there. I could get them out, but what's the point? But so what I did is I measured 1,000 times and made sure I got it right, using reference points in these cars that you have that would indicate, you know, a true point, so you could square things up. And I did that, and luckily the old man had a hoist that I could put the car on, and I rigged up some props for the diff so it wouldn't move, and bolted plates that I had to the original control arms, and essentially tacked everything to the diff where it had to go, with the mounts for the upper arms and the lower arms. And while I was there, I was going to do a sway bar, but I thought I'd run the car without the sway bar because I don't think it really needs it in the back of these. Turns out I was right. It doesn't really need it, but I've had this diff out a couple of times, and I probably should have welded mounts for the the sway bar back then, but the car handled great anyway. But kind of veering off track here and there. It's going to be a fairly long video. But what I did is, having some experience in drag racing as well as speedway, and you talk about sort of pinion angles and whatnot, what I did is I set the car up with a 3.5 degree pinion angle. Now that was 3.5 degrees down, so as you think, when the wheels turn, it wants to lift the diff up like that. So the bushes and everything in this are good. Like, there's very little movement in this at all. But I've done that so you would obviously get good drive coming off turns, and anyone who kind of knows a bit about suspension would have a pretty good understanding why I did that. But in saying that, suspension, when you're in any kind of motor sport scene that's to do with cars, even bikes, everyone has their own idea and opinion on what they think is going to work best in whatever car they've got or whoever they're helping. So I'm not saying you should do exactly, as a bit of a disclaimer, I'm not saying you should do exactly what I've done because it's worked for me. It's open slather pretty much. It's whatever anyone thinks that they think will work in the knowledge that they have. By all means, you go play around with your car and do whatever you think it will work and get it around a track or down a strip or whatever you're doing, however you think it would work best. I done what I thought would work best for this car, and for me that was running a 3.5 degree pinion angle down. Now, you don't want to run your pinion angle up, because essentially that wants to unweight the rear end in a way. So if you ever look at a four-wheel drive, if someone has a lifted four-wheel drive or anything like that, and their pinion angle's changed, and a lot of four-wheel drives actually have a pinion angle sort of pointing up. I'm not sure what degrees it'd be. Who knows? At a rough guesstimate, it could be around 10 degrees or more. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But when you see them accelerate, if they go to accelerate quick, because that pinion angle is pointing up, like pointing up over the motor, what you see them do when they accelerate quickly is they lift. The suspension of the car lifts like this. Now, drag racing, depending on what the car is, like a Pro Mod or anything like that, some of them actually do lift as they go down the track, and they're designed to do that. Circuit cars are different. You want to have a certain amount of squat in the back so it gets weight over the back to grip up and get drive coming off the turn. That's why I went 3.5 degree pinion angle down. So essentially it's pointing towards the sump. But like I said, each to their own when it comes to that suspension setup. So, but what I did is I actually lengthened the car. Like I said, if you could draw a center line in the middle of the car, and then you drew a line to the center of the axle, I lengthened this car slightly. Now this, like I said, this was back in 2017. So not 100%. I've got it all written down in a book actually, but I'm not 100% off the top of my head what the measurements were and how much longer it was that I made it. I don't think it was that much at all. I think it might have been somewhere around maybe 15, 20 mil, something like that, longer in the back alone. And I made it longer in the front as well because of the adjustable radius rod and control arms to change your camber. So again, each to their own and what they think is going to work for their car. But what I thought would work for this car, because it doesn't have a lot of body roll, in my experience, I decided to go, I think it's got somewhere in the ballpark of 4.5 degrees caster and about 4.5 degrees of negative camber. So that's positive caster, so in line of the car, so the struts laid back like that. So nothing's moved in the top. So how I actually done it is the bottom control arm and radius rod move forward. Now, if I put the standard guards back on this, so you can see standard references, you'll see the front wheel actually closer to the front of the guard. Now again, I can't remember exactly what measurement it is because it was so long ago, but I think it could be in the ballpark of around 35 to 40 mil, something like that. So the whole wheelbase of this car, front to rear, has been lengthened. Now, when I used to race this car in the early 2000s, all I could afford was road tyres, and it was a very twitchy car. So mostly because of the tyres, but also they are a short wheelbase, they are a short car. So this time around, back in 2017, in its version 2, ironically, I called it Syko Sptinter 2.0, and it kind of was fitting because the engine I put in it was a 2 litre. So lengthening the front wheelbase from the centre line of the car and the rear wheelbase, as anyone would know, a longer wheelbase makes the car more stable. Now that worked brilliantly for this car, and I actually bought a set of sort of lower end, cheaper semi slicks for this car, because when I just finished it, like, I had money that I saved up to finish this car at the end of 2022, and I pretty much went to town on it. I had time off over Christmas, New Year, and just got stuck into this car for about 5 or 6 weeks straight. And like anyone who's done these things would know, that this age-old saying could not be more true. The final 20% takes 80% of the time, and probably more of your budget than you really think, because the bolts that I didn't replace in this car that are still the original are actually the rear control arm bolts. Every other bolt in this car is brand new, or it was brand new at the end of 2022. So you add up nuts and bolts that go into these cars, it would surprise you how expensive they are. And I've actually got spare bolts that I've had here and there that I've just gathered, and how much you pay for packets of bolts and stuff like that, like $10 here, $10 there, adds up. So I have a box that's probably got over $1,000 worth of nuts and bolts in it. But anyway, so getting back to the geometry of the front end, it's 4.5 degrees negative camber, and from memory it's about 4 to 4.5 degrees of positive caster that it's got in it. Now, I didn't want to go too much caster in it because this has got a manual steering rack in it, and when you combine that with grippy slicks that I have run in this car, makes the steering pretty heavy. Now, I have wanted to put like an electronic power steering in this car, but it's also a money thing, and like I was kind of like, I can deal with it. It just means that if you get the car sideways, it's harder to control, and you really got to be on top of it. So you can do it, but the steering is pretty heavy. Now, it's going to make having a go at drifting in this car probably that bit more difficult. Now, I'm not trying to make up excuses here, but I'm pretty sure that every drift car out there has power steering of some sort, whether it's hydraulic or electronic. And this might be the only car that will be out there that doesn't have power steering. So it's going to be a bit tricky trying to throw it around and get it back and not lose it. But we'll see how we go. I might be taking it out this Friday night to a drift practice. we'll just have to stay tuned. Hopefully all that works out. But I've been doing a bit of work on this car this afternoon to get it ready. I've got the tow hooks mounted in the front and the rear. Changed the panel bar. So that's all right. But yeah, back to the front end. So the way to tell if you have too much camber or not is, especially if you have a fresh set of slicks and you get your tyre pressures right, you can see how much the tyre is wearing to the shoulder or over the shoulder. Now, I probably could have changed a few things in the front end to try different things, but judging by when I put new slicks on this car and went racing on it, there was a bit of wear just over the shoulder of the tyre. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the camber's bang on. So when I had it all digitally aligned and I told the guys at the shop what I was wanting as far as degrees and whatnot, and we went with, was like 1 mil. I would prefer to talk in degrees, but I think it's 1 mil to 1.5 mil, something like that, of toe out as well. So I wanted very minimal toe out on it. Now, some people probably think that would make it too dirty, but the car is actually pretty well balanced. So pretty much when I got to the track, looking at the wear on the tyres, I thought I'm pretty close to that, to how it should be. And then I just worked on the adjustment that I have in the sway bar, so I can move the links out or in, which changes its leverage point and essentially changing the tension on the sway bar itself. So what do I do? I think I originally had it out a hole and it felt too soft, and then I actually moved it back in a hole and that felt better. And then I went up compression and preload on the spring. I think I have, from memory, I think three turns of preload in the front spring. The back, I only have 1 turn of preload in the spring, I think it was. But anyway, this is kind of getting to be a long video. But I just thought, anyone out there that would like to know sort of the ins and outs a bit more of what this car's actually got, what I've done to it, this will be informative for you. If not, you've probably already tuned out and went to a different YouTube page to check out what's happening there. But if you've hung around, thanks a lot. It means that you have a genuine interest in this car. Me personally, I love this car. I've always loved the A86s from when I was a kid, and might give you a bit of an idea of roughly how old I am, but I'm only 21, so figure that out. But yeah, I love these cars from when I was a kid, you know, growing up in the 90s and seeing these race. And then our own John Smith went from racing these to the Supra, and I'm fortunate enough to have a Supra that I'm building into a race car. And if you'd like to see some of what I've done as a Supra so far, so I've got a roll cage in it. I've done the roll cage in it, and I've done a bit of the bulkhead for the rear fuel cell in the back of it as well. But because I've retired this, it means all the work that I was doing on the Supra has kind of come to a bit of a halt, unfortunately for it. But I've also injured my back again, and that's caused me issues the last year. So I really haven't had a lot of money to spend on the Supra. So out of my toys, for lack of a better word, that I've got, the Sprinter is the only one that is still running and driving. And that is why what money I do have from selling some other parts and stuff that I've accumulated over years that I don't need anymore, I've been selling off, and that's what's keeping me going on what spare money I have has gone into this a bit to help fix this up from a bit of a beating that it's copped the last 2 years. And yeah, anyone that is a fan of AE86s in general just loves them. And me, I love this car. And if someone does buy it, it will be a very, very sad day because, like I said, I've owned this car for over 20 years, and it's it's been it's been a fun time. Out of all the cars I've had over the years, I've said this to a couple of my mates as well. You get frustrated with cars and you just park it in the corner and you go, I'll get to it when I get to it. This car has, for whatever reason, been the only car I've ever had, besides the HJ Ute that I had, the blue HJ Ute, that I actually don't mind working on. And when I get the chance to work on it, it's just, it's so easy. I built this car based on the KISS theory, which is keep it simple, stupid. And you can apply that to pretty much everything. I applied that to this car because in the time I had this car as well, I had a few SW20 MR2s, and anyone who's had them knows they are a little bit of a pain in the ass to work on when it comes to working around the engine bay, or if you have to pull a fuel cell out, and or if you change it from an automatic to a manual, which I have done on one of them. They're a little bit of a pain in the ass to work on. So because I had a couple of them at the same time as this as well, it really put me in the KISS theory rebuilding this car. But anyway, so plan is to get it out Friday night for some drift practice, see how it goes. I'll probably put another set of wheels on it, as weird as it looks. So I'm just going to say this. This is probably the rattiest this car has looked in maybe 10 years in reality. So you can see how light it is. I'm moving the car quite easily. So here's another bit of trivia. If you're still hanging around this time, if you want to know what this car weighs, so I've done the roll cage to pretty much minimum specs just to save a bit of weight, because I gain weight in the Hilux diff alone. Now it probably weighs two of the original T-Series diff that I had in this. But the car in race trim with, I think, half a tank of fuel I had in it when I had it on the scales, weighs 940 kilos. So it's not as light as what some people think. There's a few people out there that thought it weighed around 800. No BS. The car weighs 940 kilos in race trim with half a tank of fuel in it, and it's only got a 30 litre fuel tank in it now. I reduced it from 50 litre fuel cell I had in it. So as far as engine goes, if you wanted to know what ECU I've got a Link G4 Monsoon, I think it is. Having a great tuner like Scotty at Nugget Garage, again, not a sponsored plug at all, but I'm happy to give the guys a shout out that have helped me with this car, because they're just great people, and I really appreciate all the help that they've given me. So Scotty at Nugget Garage, Cleveland Dyno, he's helped me tune this car a couple of times when I've had a few little issues in it for whatever reason, when I've turned the main power off while it's been sitting, so absolutely nothing's drawing in it. When I've gone to turn it back on, it's picked up a bug somewhere and it's opened up another channel in the ECU somehow mysteriously. So a ghost in the machine has done it. But yeah, apart from that, it's, regardless of what some people out there think that I've raced with, that think it's worked off its proverbial bosoms, it's not. It's 100% genuine, original, standard Toyota Altezza Beams 3 SGE. Like I said in a previous video, this is a G5 that's in it now, so it's from 2004 or 5, somewhere like that. And the other motor that was in it in 2023 when I was running it There's very slight differences between the motors, but it's a G3 and they both made within 1 or 2 horsepower of each other. The main difference is the power curve through the middle. So this made a little bit more torque, but more mid-range. Because this engine made more mid-range than the previous one, it showed in my lap times, and there's another place where I gain time. So to give you an idea what times I've run in this car with a decent set of Hankook slicks on it, again, not a sponsored plug, it's just I've found that Hankooks are the best value for money that I've found with this car. So I managed to dip into the 58s at Lakeside, which anyone who knows, who watches this, who might have been there and raced their car around there, that's a pretty stout time for a standard little 4-cylinder, naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, running on pump 98. So it was in the 60s around there for a long time, then got into the 59s, and then knew if I did a few little changes to suspension and put decent tyres on it, it would get into the 58s, and that's exactly what it did. Now, to be honest with you, if I put a set of softs on this, and I've spoken to some of my other mates in the class as well, and I've said, no BS, my honest opinion, if I put a set of soft compound slicks on this, so I've got a set of 9-inch wide wheels for the back and 8s for the front, if I bought soft slicks for this, it would be in the high 57s, maybe even a mid 57. That's ridiculous. So it'll do it, 100%, no doubt in my mind. Now, QR on the national circuit, I've done 1 minute 22s around there, and Morgan Park, what did I do around there? I think I've dipped into the 122s, 123s around there, but it does 25s easy. If I really get into it, it gets into the 23s, and I think high 22s I might have done from memory. So it's quick for what it is, and I'm pretty bloody proud of it, because whatever money I have had, I've spent on a hobby that's a passion, and managed to do pretty well. So I'm very fortunate. Now, the plan with the Supra is to do absolutely everything. So I've bent the bars for the roll cage, and I've tacked them in and finish weld the roll cage. So that car will be 100% my doing, my build. So anyway, this has been a long video. We'll wrap it up here. So if you've made it this far, I appreciate it. And if you want to see more content like this, like a bit of insight on maybe even the Supra, I could do a little video, not as long as this, on the Supra, what I've done with it, what I have planned for that. And yeah, so leave a comment if you want to see more of the Supra or more of the Sprinter, or want to know anything about what I've told you. Yeah, leave a comment. Happy to answer anyone's questions. And yeah, if you want to see more of this, like, share, subscribe, and yeah, I'm happy to take people's opinions. Like I said, I'm new to this. Happy to take people's opinions on how they think I could do better, but keep in mind, I'm doing this off my phone because it's all I can afford at the moment. So, you know, when I get back to work and have some money coming in, and I have some money to spend on the car and cameras and stuff like that, and probably a computer, I will definitely do that and make these videos better quality, and we'll keep progressing and get things improved, you know, better. So it is what it is at the moment. I'll wrap it up. So if you made it this far, thanks again for watching and tuning in, and I appreciate it. And we'll keep plodding along and making things better and being a bit informative, and hopefully the next video is a bit of drift work in this thing, which will be a bit different for it as opposed to racing. So anyway, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. Cheers.